Hello, brilliant entrepreneur. It's Tash here, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to answer someone's question, which is actually a follow-up from my Sales Conversations episode. And the question is, what makes a question a qualifying question? So if you've listened to my episode about sales conversations, you'll know that in the sales process, one of the most important things that we need to do is ask quality, qualifying questions. And so someone reached out and said, but how do I know whether it's a qualifying question or not? And I think that is such a juicy question. I wanted to put an episode together for it. Now, it's going to be a fairly short episode of the podcast, but I think it's a really juicy one. This is episode number 423, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/423. And in those show notes, I'll also be sure to link back to the previous episode about sales conversations so that if you miss that one, you'll be able to catch up on it. Or if you want to refresh, you can as well. Let's jump into it. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money, and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Okay, so a super quick recap as to why we need to be asking qualifying questions. Qualifying questions are one of the most effective ways to make sales using consent-based practices. So one of the things that I love about my sales process and my sales conversations is that I never pitch something to people unless I know that they're actually interested in hearing that pitch. I never just throw sales pitches at people and disregard whether they're interested in hearing it or not. I don't want to be that person who accosts you as you're walking through a shopping mall and trying to tell you the benefits of their hand cream when they haven't even got any clue as to whether I'm interested in hand cream or not, right? Like, I don't want to be that kind of person. So I use qualifying questions both in my one-to-many marketing and content, as well as in my sales conversations one-on-one. But not all questions are qualifying questions. What makes a question a qualifying question is when the answer helps me discern that person's readiness and suitability for buying something from me. Their readiness and their suitability for buying something from me. So if I am talking to someone about the Heart Centered Business Planning System and I say, do you like business plans? And they say, yeah. Does that tell me, are they ready and suitable for the Heart Centered Business Planning System? Or if they say no, does it give me any extra insight? No, it doesn't. If I ask that person, what's your favorite thing about business planning? And they say, oh, I just love like having a really solid idea of like what my goals could be or that sense of possibility. Again, it doesn't actually tell me, are they ready and suitable to buy something from me to help them with this? Yeah. So a qualifying question is one that helps me to discern a person's readiness and suitability for buying something from me. So if I was going to ask a qualifying question about planning, I instead might say, what do you think is the number one thing stopping you from consistently implementing your business plan? And if they say, I've never had a plan and I need one, well, they need my planning system. Similarly, if they say, well, I feel like I write the plan and I'm really excited about it for the first couple of weeks, but then everything dies off, that also tells me about their readiness and suitability for the Heart Centered Business Planning System, right? It's giving me insights into what is the gap that they've got or what is the problem that needs to be solved. And then I can determine and discern whether my product is actually going to be suitable for them. Is that actually going to address that for them? Is this something that I can focus on when I'm talking about my solution that's going to actually help them to solve the very problem that they've identified? So, in a nutshell, a qualifying question helps you to qualify whether people are ready for the next step towards working with you, their readiness and their suitability. Unfortunately, there's no hard and fast formula or rule for how to craft great qualifying questions that works across every different kind of business. Questions that are great qualifying questions for one niche are ridiculously terrible for others. What it takes is practice and discernment. Now, one of the things I also want to remind you of is that qualifying questions don't just apply to sales conversations. You can ask qualifying questions on the emails you send to your mailing list, on your social media, in a one-to-many way. And this is a way that you can actually invite your warm leads to connect with you. And in answering the question, they're self-identifying as potentially being ready and suitable to invest in a paid product of yours. So using qualifying questions on social media is a brilliant lead generation strategy when you learn how to ask those questions well. But as I said, there is no one formula. What you need to do is get about practicing asking questions on social media, asking questions in sales conversations, and learning what insights and what questions are most likely to get your ideal clients, those who are ready and suitable, leaning in and answering more consistently. And there you have it. That's what makes a question a qualifying question. The answer helps you discern the readiness and suitability for the person to pay you for something, to buy something from you. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, with the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/423, I'll include a link to my previous podcast episode about sales conversations, but I'll also include a link there to the Takeoff program. Takeoff is my signature program to help you to consistently attract and convert leads from online channels, and is a comprehensive program that includes mentorship and group coaching so that you can get my advice, mentoring, and feedback on these types of challenges and strategies in your own business. Qualifying questions, crafting questions, and refining your sales processes are things that we talk about in our group coaching calls very consistently in the Takeoff program. So if this is something that you struggle with, I invite you to come and check it out. I'll make sure I pop the link with the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/423. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine.